At $200, a Super Nintendo setup costs twice as much as the old system. For the money, the company promises better pictures, sound, and adventure. Now you're playing with power, superpower. You're the king, I tell you! The king!
Only for Super NES.
Only on Super NES.
You're listening to the SNES Podcast with your host, Soul Blazer.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Super NES Podcast, episode number 222. As always, I'm joined by Joe.
Hello.
This is Greg, the other co-host, and we're honored today to have a special co-host with us here today, talking about the Actraiser games. So before we go into the intro about the games themselves, I'm going to ask our special guest host here to introduce himself briefly and just talk about anything he wants to talk about himself to set things up, and also, if you could, sir, also share your experiences with us, like about your Super NES memories, history, that kind of stuff.
All right. Hi, I'm Sean. Been a gamer all my life. Started with the NES. The Super Nintendo came out, I think, when I was 6 years old, so it was a big childhood console for me, and a lot of my favorite games are on that system. So I have a lot to say about it, I think.
Cool. So you guys system like pretty early after its release then?
I think I was maybe 8 or 9 when I got mine, so 92 or 93.
Okay, yep. Yes, I bought mine for Christmas 91, so it was like pretty shortly after the system got released.
Okay.
So, and Joe, as fellow listeners to the podcast know, was primarily a Genesis kid, but he did have some experience with Super NES because of like friends and whatnot.
I didn't own a Super Nintendo until George gifted me one with F-Zero, and that was like, geez,
I remember that, yes.
7 years ago now.
So you never played the Actraiser games before this podcast then, correct?
No, I played them just for this podcast.
Okay, awesome. All right. Okay. So speaking about. Speaking about the long-term listeners of the podcast, some people in this podcast may know we already covered Actraiser way back when, during the very early days of the podcast, like 7-8 years ago. But as with some other games that we've covered on the podcast, the games like Super Star Wars and Chrono Trigger, we decided that perhaps it was okay to go back and revisit this game, especially because of how long it passed, and also because as we just established, Joe had never played the games before. So our original intent was only to cover Actraiser 2, but I'm like, well, what kind of makes sense to throw the first game in here too as well, because there are similarities between them. And we were also talking about the recent remake of Actraiser, Actraiser Renaissance as well, toward the end of the podcast. So there's actually 3 games in one, like this episode. So, which is why I also felt it was like very appropriate to bring on a guest host with the podcast to help us break all down this very meaty material here. So,
Gonna be jam-packed.
Jam-packed, hopefully, yes. Let me talk about my experiences of Actraiser here a little bit here to set things up. So then I'll ask you, Sean, about your experiences. Actraiser was a very early Super NES release. The game came out originally in Japan in December of 1990, but it did come out in North America until November of 91. So, and then it got released in Europe several months later, like in March of 93. Actually, Europe's misleading because from what I understand, the game was released in PAL format, but it wasn't released in Europe. Like it was released in story only.
Oh,
so as a result, these days, PAL Actraiser games are very rare and expensive due to that fact. So that is weird. Well, Europe didn't get a lot of releases that North America got. Their library is really as small as our library was here compared to Japan. The European library really was even smaller compared to like what we had over here. So. So Actraiser came out pretty early in the system's in the system's history, so there weren't a lot of games available for it. I think that helped because probably a lot of people checked this game out who wouldn't otherwise have played it. because the fact because the library was so small at like that point still. So I got the game several months after it was released in like the spring of '90, spring of '92 or whatever. So, and I fell in love with it like right away. To this day, Actraiser is still like one of my top 10 games period of all time because of just because there's so many things I love about the game and I adore about it, and I probably could gush about it for hours here, but. The game is very unique in the sense that it's a there really isn't a great term talking about games like this. John and I were discussing this a little bit before like off mic. This is there really isn't a great term to talk about like hybrid games like this, like there is for for example like Souls-like or Metroidvanias. But several Wikipedia articles of other hybrid-like games do use the term hybrid games. I guess hybrid games is the best way to describe this. Like probably the best example for like modern gamers, so like a hybrid game, would be the Persona games, because those games, the modern ones at least, are also hybrid games between like a traditional JRPG, dungeon crawler game, and also like a school simulator. So Actraiser is probably one of the more famous examples of a classic hybrid game. There are others. There's also a game like GBA, which I really like, called Sigma Star Story, which is a hybrid GBA game, which is a hybrid space shooter game, and also like an RPG, which is a very interesting combo. So Actraiser definitely is one of the more famous hybrid games. So it's half a platforming and also half a simulation game. So. Do you remember? Sean, you said you got this game fairly early on. Like in the games, like in the system release too, right?
Yeah. So I actually didn't own it. I only ever rented it. I own it on Wii Virtual Console nowadays, but back then I only ever played it as a rental. But I remember. Like looking at the back of the box, and I'm sure I was drawn toward the side-scrolling action aspect of it, and like, let's see how I like the simulation part. But yeah, once I jumped into it, like obviously I have a big love of side-scrolling action games, but then I tried the simulation part of it as well, and like after fumbling around with it for a bit, I was like, okay, I get this, and it ties in with the side-scrolling action really well. Like they blend the two genres together in a very simple but elegant way, in the sense that like in the action stages you earn points, and the points determine how big of a population you can make in the simulation stages, and then in turn the population is what levels you up and makes you stronger for the action stages. So that back and forth really, I think, makes for a really good experience.
I agree totally. The game dev does a very good job of blending the two aspects together, like in that symbiotic, that's a hard word to say, relationship between them. And yeah, it took me a while to realize as a kid what was going on there with that, because your points you earn that directly affect your population limits, and the game doesn't really explain that to you very well. So it definitely took me a while as a kid playing this game to realize that's what was going on here. So. Let's talk about the developer a little bit here, because the developer does play kind of like a kind of big impact upon the game's development, and also is kind of interesting in and of itself. The Actraiser games were developed by a company called Quintet, which was a new company at the time. They were founded in 1989. Actraiser was actually the first game of theirs that they actually made, as a matter of fact. But the team was not rookies. Most people who formed Quintet, including its president Tomoyoshi Mizagasi, were actually veterans from Falcon, where they'd worked on games like there's the E series. So even though Quintet was a new company, they had experienced programmers. That's why this game, even though it was the first game for theirs, came out as well as it did. they're probably better known for having done later on in Super NES lifespan the so-called Soul Blazer trilogy. Like they developed the games Soul Blazer, Illusion of Gaia, and Terranigma. Which unfortunately the last game never came out to North America. That's a European only game. So there are. I was just saying before how the Europeans got shafted, unfortunately, with a bunch of games not released over there. Well, they got a few games that were only unique to their part of the world, and this is by Terranigma was like one of their games for sure. So all three of those games I think are like very good. Illusion of Gaia, in fact, was so good Nintendo themselves published the game here in North America. So. But yeah, so those three games are also like very fun games to play, I think. The company kind of never officially closed. It's kind of interesting. It's kind of interesting. It's kind of interesting what happened here, and this also kind of ties into Renaissance as well too, because it's like they just apparently just went inactive after a while. The last game that they made was released 2004. By the way, I did not know this until Flight was doing research. I don't know if either of you guys have played this game either, but I did not realize Quintet also developed a game, like an action RPG game for an interaction RPG game for PlayStation called Grand Stream Saga. Have like, you guys like played that?
I've heard of it, never played it.
It's a good game. It's kind of clunky in ways, but the game is one of the first Western games to use Japanese style like anime cutscenes. Like in the game, so definitely got a lot of attention because of that reason. So they developed that game, and I didn't realize that until I was doing my research on this recently. So they also worked with Sega like in making the first like Shenmue game as well too. So. Anyway, like I said, the last game came on 2004. The company just like went quiet after that point. At that point, it just seems to have simply just shut down. They never officially closed. The website was still open until 2008, but nobody really knows like what happened to them. And going back talking about like Terranigma. There was a big fan-led effort in 2021 to try to see if the rights of the game could be obtained somehow, so that Terranigma could finally get released in the West, like many other games. North America, because nowadays it's popular for a lot of games that didn't come out in original North America to be released here in this region. So there was a big effort back then to find out if it was possible to do that with that game. But the president, like Tomoyoshi Miyazaki, apparently just disappeared. Nobody knows this day if he's still alive. Nobody knows where he is. Nobody knows anything about him. So it's very strange. And because he was the president, he has some of the rights to the game. So it's like, that's kind of like the legal gray area where that whole mess falls into. Now, obviously, Renaissance came out that same year. So Square Enix must have some rights to some Quintet games, but we don't exactly know what the story is like as far as that goes. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, I didn't even know they were making games as late as 2004. Like, I only ever really knew about their Super Nintendo games.
Right. Definitely. I think you're not alone for that. Most of the games they are known for did come out on that system. They also released, a couple of Saturn games. They also released a Godzilla game for the Dreamcast. Huh. Their last games were Mystic Heroes, the GBA, which was published by Koei in 2002. And also a game called like Inuyasha, based upon the anime, published by Bandai for the PS2 in 2004.
I have played Mystic Heroes for GameCube.
I think that's the same game. Let me see about that. The GBA version was published simultaneously like the GameCube version. So
okay, yeah, I was gonna say I played the GameCube version as well.
I never did, so that's interesting, but. Anyway, interesting history there. As far as Quintet goes. So, as we already, we've already mentioned Quintet. Quintet's first game of the system, was this game that Enix published. I already was a big fan of simulation games. I've always been a big fan of simulation games because by this point I already played Civilization, SimCity, other games for the computer that were very synth heavy. So I think like Sean, the action platformer of this game appealed to me at first, but once I started playing the game, the simulation part of the game, I also found it very very fun. So. And because it is a simulation game, there's kind of a plot involved in this game as well. They did change the plot somewhat for the Western release because of the strict censorship Nintendo had going on like the time period. But because in the Japanese version of the game, you're literally playing the Japanese version of the game, like you're literally playing as God. Your main opponent is literally Satan, and so there's a lot more heavy religious overtones. In that version of the game compared to what we got here in the West, but they didn't have to make too many changes graphically as far as the game went. When they prepared it for its U.S. release, they simply just changed the story around and also changed the translation of the script around to either soften or change those elements to make it more like censorship friendly, like over here in the West. You're basically playing as the Master this time. And basically, the plot just evolves around there's a big battle, against like the big bad, the evil boss, like who's known as Tenzra, and eventually the Master either lost or went to a draw with him. It's never clarified, and went to a deep healing sleep for a long time. And when you wake up, you only have one angel left to assist you, and the whole world has been taken over by evil. The civilization's been destroyed, and your job basically is just to use these old statues of yourself to beam your spirit down to the ground, to sanitize the areas, and make the areas safe again for people to recolonize and return to the world. So the game follows a pattern. There's 6 stages, and each stage opens up with an action stage where you're going through the platform and stuff with the boss at the end. Then the simulation part in the center, then finally a second action stage to finish that stage, like along with a boss. The game does give you some freedom to change to do stages out of order if you want to. But for first-time player, I definitely recommend following the recommended order in the game because, as Sean mentioned before, there's a direct relationship between how well you do in the action stages to making your character stronger, to the simulation stages, which also carries over to make your guy stronger in action, and so on and so on. So there definitely is a relationship going on there. So, Joe, this being your first time playing the game, and since I know your dislike of simulation stuff, I'm very curious to hear what you thought about this game, how you thought the two aspects blended together, and if you were able to tolerate the simulation light parts of the game.
Yeah. So, I'm just going to read my notes verbatim because I think that's just it's perfect. So first off, calling this a side-scrolling action platformer would be selling the game short.
Yes.
Because there is that simulation aspect of it. Obviously, yes, you're running on a 2D plane. You run from left to right, like all the wonderful things that we do in platformers. But, man, this game is a test of patience. Recognizing patterns is a big thing, which I will tell you right now, the first time going through, I was trying to Rambo my way through and just kind of, you know me, I run and gun. So no thought, just running in. Like, I would get lucky, I'd kill people and whatnot, but like once I got to the boss, the what do you call it, a centaur, he messed me up so bad. I died probably legit about 20 times before I finally was like, all right, let me slowly approach this, and I realized there's a pattern, and then figuring out where you can jump over and kind of like get out of the way and then attack him. And it's a slow, methodical, and that's the thing. Like, it's good as a side-scrolling platformer, but it's, like I said, you have to pay attention to the details. And as Sean mentioned, you'd get the bonus of, if you pay attention and you do well and you kill enemies and you rack up that score, your population is going to grow. So it is an aspect of the game, maybe not one that's very well explained, but it's there. I think for the most part, it was a pretty good variety of enemies that you encounter for the most part. I did think it was funny that some of the stuff is like tiny and you're supposed to be God, and I'm just like, how are these tiny little things hurting God? But it is what it is. I also loved that you start as like a stone statue, lightning strikes it, and then you come to life. It reminded me so much of oh my god, I see I didn't write this in my notes, and that's why I can't think of it right now. It's not not Golden Axe. It's a Genesis game. That's the whole reason I was going to bring it up. The one where he's like, rise from your grave.
Altered Beast.
Oh. There we go, Altered Beast. Thank you. God, I feel so dumb there. But yeah, so like I very much like was like, oh, okay. Like I felt some retro vibes seeing that lightning strike him and he comes to life. And that side-scrolling beat 'em up style, that's pretty much that's my bread and butter. So, yeah, the Sims section. So this isn't SimCity. This is not Populous. No. This is very light, and I say, technically not even really a sim, but it is. But it's very, very light. So you're an angel, and you can blast demons with your little bow and arrow and whatnot. And you have followers, and the followers will ask you to, do different things. So you use your divine magic to, like, strike lightning, and it burns bushes, and it opens up land so they can build and all that. And, it was a pretty good... I like the aspects that they were bringing into the game, where it's kind of like baby's first simulation in all reality, because you don't have to do the farming. You don't have to, wait till you have supplies. It's all based on that score, the population, and then it's a matter of, directing them to whatever demon layer so that they can essentially fill that hole and help keep the demons out. And, yeah, I mean, it's fine. This is not going to win Game of the Year for me. And you all should know that, because Greg has pointed out numerous times I'm not a sim guy. So when I do play sim games, I cheat. And I cheat so bad it's not even funny. I just don't have patience.
Well, I figured that because...
Why farm when I can just put need food
right,
2,000?
I figured this would at least be tolerable for you because of the angel aspect. You're kept busy controlling the angel to fight out the demons for most of the stage until the very end, in which you found like you managed to see all the layers. I figured the action part of it would keep you busy enough that you be at least tolerate the simulation part of this game fine.
Yeah,
so.
and I like the little aspects that I didn't expect to see. Like, if you let the demons just come and do their thing, like, you'll see your villagers literally getting picked up and taken away.
Yeah.
Which was hilarious. I was thinking like Wizard of Oz and the Winged Monkeys. But yeah, it's little things like that I was like, is this my type of game? Not really. But that was a nice little touch there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was enough to keep me engaged.
Yeah. There's a running joke of this game that your angel like is a naked kid, but he does look he does look pretty unclothed in the graphics, for sure. But and to be fair, like I don't know if we're gonna approach these like we usually do with the other podcasts, but like for this being a early Super Nintendo release, I thought the graphics were pretty solid. It is so impressive, like an early, Super NES game.
Some of the earlier stuff that you covered, like that's one of the biggest complaints is like, oh my god, like the graphics are just kind of there, but like it's not super yet. You know what I mean? And the music I thought was okay. It wasn't fantastic, and it's not anything like I put it in my notes. It's nothing to write home about. It's cool.
Really?
It's cool that they got a full orchestra into that little cart. Don't get me wrong, that is impressive. But for me, like, those musical numbers didn't, become like, what do they call it? Earworms, where like, like you just get it stuck in your head and you want to hear it over and over again. It just, it didn't do that for me. You know what I mean? So for me, it was I don't want to say forgettable, but that's the best way to explain it, because it just didn't grab me where I was like, yeah, you know what? I want to go find the soundtrack, or I want to hear other music that this composer's done, something like that. It was just kind of, okay, it services the game, and in the aspects of the game, it's fantastic. And I think it goes above and beyond for what it's intended. I think they did a great job, and it's very angelic. And yeah, I like I said, I don't think it's anything to write home about, but for what it is and for the presentation it brings, I think it's very good.
Yeah, very hard to disagree there, because I'm sure you've heard this musicians working on other games. This game is scored by the famous Yuzo Takashiro, who also did the soundtracks for the Street of Rage franchise,
yeah.
The Wizard, like the NES, some of the Ys games, and he also worked on like Shinobi 3 soundtrack as well too, among other games. So he is one of my favorite top 5 composers, period, because I really think his stuff is like great.
Yeah, I mean, just Streets of Rage 1 and 2, those soundtracks are fantastic.
He's actually one of the rare talents who was able to do great work on more than one system.
Right.
Because a lot of composers they just did one system because that's what they have experience with. He's done great work on both the Super NES and Genesis games. So here's somebody who knows how to take the best aspects of like each chip and wring the best music out of it possible. Because like as you know, I'm on the record of saying I don't think generally the Genesis sound chip is as good as the Super NES, but I do think there are some Genesis games with amazing soundtracks. Street of Rage definitely has it.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, yeah, this was a game I loved to show off to friends when the system was like brand new, because like this game, Super Castlevania 4. Both those games were so mind blowing as far as like graphics and music went that I could just that anybody came over, I would just like grab this game, slam this bad boy like the system, and be like, here. I'll take a look at this, because this really showed off the system so well. The Mode 7 effects, like I like spin down like the world each time, was really mind blowing like the time period. So, and just like the full detailed lush graphics, the great orchestral sounding soundtrack. So there's really very little I could find fault with this game with. As you mentioned, Joe, the platforming is a bit rough. Because your guy is very stiff. He is hard to use sometimes, I thought. So you do have to get used to his style and his method and whatnot. Later on in the game, you also pick you also can find magic scrolls to learn magic as you go through the game, and the magic spells do help you tremendously in gameplay. So I think that the later game is actually a bit easier because of that, because your levels are higher, and you also have magic to help you out with. So, but yeah, anyway, so. That's pretty much what I expected to hear from you. Maybe not about the music. That surprised me. But yeah, it's pretty much what I expected to hear. So Sean, what about you? Do you want to? Do you have anything you want to say about this game as far as your own experiences, memories, or anything else you want to add on to it?
Yeah, I would just like to say that I was a little stunned, speechless by Joe saying that the soundtrack was nothing to write home about. Because, I'm more with Greg on this one, that Yuzo Koshiro, he's one of my favorites. I put him up there with, like, David Wise, who did Donkey Kong Country, and Hiroki Kikuta, who did Secret of Mana. And I think he especially excels at opening level music. That Fillmore Act 1 music it goes hard right at the beginning. and then I also really like the Blood Pool music. That's another favorite of mine.
That's my favorite piece. Yep. So,
and then let's see. Yeah, aside from the music, you mentioned that you're in the side-scrolling stages, you do control a little stiff, and I don't really perceive that as a flaw myself. I just think it's something that you have to get used to.
Yes.
As far as any like real negatives I could say about the game is that the simulation stages don't have any real consequence for failure in them. There's no actual challenge. Like you might lose some of your people due to monster attacks every now and then, but you can always get them back. There's no game over in the simulation stages or anything like that. It's just very much keep plugging away at it and eventually you'll finish it. But I do like how simple it is. It makes it very accessible for people like me who don't play a lot of simulation games.
True. Yeah, definitely for sure. So, this game is unfortunately somewhat short. If you know what you're doing, like an average playthrough is probably anywhere from like 8 to 10 hours, probably. So, I mean, it's not a particularly like long game. So, but Joe, did you figure out the earthquake trick?
I did not.
Once you get the ability to, so once you get the ability to be able to do earthquakes, but that's more of a later game skill once your character gets strong enough. Once you get the ability to do earthquakes, you may remember how the towns, their civilization progresses like up to 3 different levels. The towns get bigger, and each house looks different, and also looks different, and also can fit more people in them. So an easy way to grow your town in the later game is just use earthquake to wipe out the entire town and force the town to rebuild over again, like start like level 3.
Oh, okay.
So, it's a great trick. And you can use emulators to definitely fast forward through the town sim stages to make it faster these days. To help out the amount of time sitting there waiting for your population to check off that one level to get that one more level that you want. So there's that perk perk going for it also. But yeah, so and the translation for being an early game is pretty good. There are a few kind of nonsense words thrown in here, nonsense words thrown in like here and there. But I think for the most part, the translation for the game is handled like pretty well. So, the European version of this game does include difficulties that. Difficulty settings. So I keep saying European. Sorry. By default, I want to say European. The PAL version of the game, I probably should say, doesn't include the option to be able to set easy, normal, or hard difficulty levels. It's one of the big differences between that version of the game and the version of the game that came out in Japan and North America. You also are able to play the action modes right from the start. Immediately in that game, compared to the North American version of the game, we can't access the action only playthrough until you finish the game first normally. So when you finish the game normally, if you push down on the main menu twice, you'll see the cursor will go down to the professional line, and if you select that, you're able to play all 13 stages of the game, the action stages back to back like a normal action game, cut out the simulation part entirely. In North America, that version's not unlocked until you beat the game normally the first time. In Australia, you're able to access that from the start. So I don't know why those changes were made, but I have played the game before on Expert on the Power ROM, and it's harder, yeah, but it's not really too bad. I don't think the difficulty settings change things too much. Overall, I thought the difficulty of this game was pretty well balanced. What did you think, Joe? Do you think the game was too hard to get the hang of it?
No, like I said, there's patterns that you have to learn, but once you get those patterns down, I didn't find it to be very difficult at all.
But, and Sean, what do you think as far as platforms go?
The magic, specifically magical stardust, and to another degree, magical aura, is kind of game breaking.
Yeah, they are, yes.
But I think it balances out pretty well in the final level with the boss rush, because you only have so many times that you can use your magic throughout it. So you kind of have to think about when you're going to use them.
Right.
And
yeah,
then,
that
and
boss
then,
was pretty hard.
and then on the other hand, like if you find that too easy, there is the professional mode, which takes away your magic completely. So you're
That's
required
true.
to learn the boss patterns and hack away at them when you can and dodge them when they're attacking. So it kind of, I think overall, yeah, the game is pretty balanced when you take all the modes into consideration and whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah, so one of the things to say about this game, besides the graphics being like very, very good for an early Super NES game, I thought they also did a great job of like enemy design, like also level design. There's a very wide variety of levels, the levels you play in this game, because you go from like swamp to deserts, going to like a frozen tree. A really good mix of like landscapes, and it's also reflected very well in the actually just as well too. I thought like a very nice mix of like both enemy design and also how the backgrounds look. The backgrounds look like for each area.
Yeah, agreed.
The really most annoying part for me in this game, I thought was toward the end of the game. When you do that one section where you have to like hop up on bubbles to make your way up to the top.
Yeah.
That can be very frustrating.
Yeah. It's very easy to lose your progress there and have to start over.
Yes, unfortunately, but the game is, however, pretty generous of lives. I thought is like I really didn't have to continue like too often this game. I thought so.
Yeah, especially if you manage to find the extra lives in the simulation stages, which are pretty well hidden. But if you can get them, they're a big help.
Correct. But yeah, so overall, I think Actraiser holds it pretty well today. I think it's like a very fun, engaging game. So it shows out the system like very well, I thought, as far as graphics, music, playability. It's a very unique game because of the hybrid mix, like the two aspects of the game, and I think it's still like a very fun game today. The game was re-released on the Virtual Console, like for both like the Wii and Wii U, but unfortunately, with the release of the remake Renaissance, the game is no longer available online legally like anymore. That's common with a lot of like games. Once a modern remake of the game comes out, the original game gets delisted, so you can't find the original game like anymore, unfortunately. So there is no legal way to play this game, unfortunately, unless you still have, like Sean does, a copy, a Wii sitting around and a copy of the game still downloaded, like ready to go. So, but the game does hold up pretty well today. Like today still, I think, as far as gameplay goes.
Yeah,
I agree.
It's if someone were to tell me like, give me a list of must-play Super Nintendo games, I would definitely put Actraiser on there. Like, even if you end up not loving it, I think you should still play it just to see the experience of the hybrid genre nature of it, and just like how ahead of its time it was, I guess.
Yes. Yep, I agree with all that. Yep. Joe, I think I heard you saying that you also thought this game held up pretty well.
Yeah, I think it held up pretty well. Like I said, obviously, it's light on the sim, so I don't even like. I know that's a big part of the game, but also like it's not. Like it's only half the game. So I mean, you get used to both sides of it, and I think the presentation works for the whole package. Even though I feel like the music didn't really stick with me, it's still very good music for the game that's presented to you. And this would be definitely a game that I would suggest anyone who has a Super Nintendo or has emulation, whatever. If you're interested in the Super Nintendo and the history of games on the Super Nintendo, this has to be one of the ones.
Okay, yep, definitely. So I definitely agree with you. I don't think either part of the game by itself would have held up on its own, but the two aspects together certainly did make for like a very full, complete game package, like for sure. So, and having said that, I think it's a good segue to go into the sequel, Actraiser 2, because they decided. I never found out exactly why Quintet made this decision. I can only make guesses. I'm curious to hear, Sean, what your guesses, because you probably have some too. But they decided with the sequel just to make the sequel action only, just like 100% platformer, like no simulation, as the box itself like proudly proclaims. So I'm guessing people probably reacted better to the action part of the action stage of the game in North America compared overall, and so Enix decided to tweak the game that way. But I never found anything online with interviews or research or anything else like that, like giving me a clear, concise, this is why we did it this way reason. But that's my guess.
So from what I heard, by the way, today 30 years since this game has been released.
Yes, yep.
So
November
from
10th,
what I heard
2023.
is basically the North American side of Enix basically said to them, hey, it looks like people really enjoyed the side-scrolling stuff, but not so much the simulation stuff. Can you give us more of the side-scrolling stuff? So they completely removed the sim stuff.
That is also what I've read. I have no idea how much truth there is to it, but that's the only thing I could find.
Yeah, and I mean, it makes sense. Obviously the first game sold pretty well because they were willing to fund and create a sequel, which we'll get into here in a bit. But all three of us mentioned, the sim aspect of it wasn't something that was holding the game down. It more or less added to the gameplay and made it more unique. So I understand why the decision might have been made, but I don't think that was the right course of action.
Okay. So Actraiser 2 came out in 1993, as we mentioned. This game actually got released almost simultaneously in both Japan and North America, which is very rare for a game of this time period.
Oh, yeah.
This came out in Japan on October 29th, and we just established it came out in North America November 10th. So for release to be that quick in both regions is very rare for that period. So, and Europe got it a full year later, November 1994. Most of the development team was still involved with this game. Same directors, same programmers, same composer doing music like this game too. So most of the team was still carried over. I'm trying to remember. I'm sorry, my memory sometimes can be kind of short. Who wants to actually open up this game discussion for us?
that was me.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So this game begins with the Master battling Tenzra. In this game, a backstory is given as to why Tenzra hates the Master so vehemently. Jeez.
That's hard to say.
Right? It's like symbiotic. Jeez. Tenzra, who was once the Master's servant, led a rebellion against him, but lost and was banished from heaven. Ripped and torn, the slain body of Tenzra fell to the underworld, feeding on the intense hatred each held for the Master. Tenzra's 7 deadly sins and their minions combine their power to raise the spirit of their mighty leader, Tenzra, now vowing revenge for his defeat by the Master, unleashing these demons upon the world. The player in this game assumes the role of the Master, aided by his angelic associate known as Crystallis. So this is kind of it's a prequel, but not a prequel.
Yeah, we're actually going to talk about that here in a little bit because I was talking with Sean. Second thought, we can do it now because Sean and I were actually talking about this a little bit before. It's never really said. It seems like the game's a sequel in many ways, but there's actually a very popular fan theory that argues the fact that this game's actually a prequel to the events of Actraiser instead, because it's both because of the plot, as what you just told it, Joe, right, and also because in this game, the statue that you take over as Master to play the stages with has a shield and wings. And at the end of the game, you see that, and in the game talks about how time passes and people forget about the Master. You see the wings and the shield fall off to look like the statue that you play in the first game. So that's the evidence that they present as it being a prequel. I'm inclined to say, yeah, probably. I mean, I really don't think it matters too much at the end if the game's a prequel versus a sequel. But it is a very interesting, it is a very interesting way to try to tie the two games together.
Yeah, I would also say it probably doesn't matter too much whether or not it's a sequel or a prequel. I do want to say one thing about the statue, because I just recently replayed Actraiser 2, and yeah, in the ending, the wings and the shield fall off, but also his sword falls off. And he's got a sword in Actraiser 1, so what do the theorists have to say about that, I wonder?
Yeah, I don't know. You're right. I mean, it's not a perfect theory, so. But, yeah, anyway, sorry about that, Joe. So
no,
go ahead.
You're good. So, yeah, Actraiser 2, man. First off, like, again, I'm reading my notes verbatim. Like, wow, what an upgrade. Graphically, this game's impressive. Super impressive. I was not expecting the jump in graphic quality for the sequel. I mean, you know, we've seen other sequels on the Super Nintendo that have looked prettier than the first one or whatever. But I feel like the sprites are a lot more detailed in this one. Might be slightly larger. Didn't quite, you know, get my measuring tape out. But, yeah, this game's just beautiful. Gone is the building part, as we said, as part of the first game. This is a strict 2D side-scroller affair. Your character kind of moves slow, which isn't great, because the enemies definitely move faster than you. But like the first game, patience is the name of the game. Same as before, watch for patterns, but this time you really can't take your time, because the enemies will drop on you from everywhere. And you will die a lot.
You will.
The double jump was a nice improvement. I like the aspect of being able to have the shield now. But I mean, it's like, because this is going to sound like I'm hating on it, but I'm not. Like, the only motivation for me to move forward in this game was the fact that it was so gorgeous that I wanted to see what was after what I was already looking at. And that was my motivation powering through this game.
Right.
I felt that, like, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's just the way I was feeling, I don't know. But, like, I felt like hitboxes were a little wonky in this.
Yes.
I was actually kind of frustrated a few times, because I was like, that dude should have died, but it is what it is. But yeah, same thing as the first game. The music works for the game. Again, you know, I wasn't inspired to go look for the soundtrack. I kind of feel a little stupid saying that now, knowing who the composer is and everything else, because I love the Streets of Rage soundtracks. But it is what it is. I didn't look up who did the soundtrack, because the soundtrack for me just wasn't like anything that blew me away. And maybe I'm just spoiled coming into the Super Nintendo as late as I have. But yeah, overall, I mean, it's the same feeling as the first one. I think it's a decent game. You take your time, learn the patterns, get through it. And if you like the sim stuff, I'm sorry, that's not here. But the 2D side-scrolling is, and it's kind of janky, but it's not horrible.
Yeah. That's a very good summary. Sean, why don't you go next? Like, what was your first experience playing this game, and what you think of it?
So my first experience with this game was probably like many people's first experience with this game. This is too hard. I'm never going to beat this. I feel like Quintet kind of alienated a lot of the potential fan base for two reasons. One, we've already discussed. They got rid of the sim aspect, and people who were fans of the original game probably were mostly like, where is it? Why isn't it in this one? And then the second thing being, there is no difficulty curve in this game. It is a difficulty cliff. Yeah. And they actually give you the option to take on each pair of stages in any order you want, even though
There's
there
also-
is a story to follow that there's a recommended order. But it really doesn't matter. You're gonna get your butt kicked no matter which one you play first.
You can change the difficulty level in this game, but I think even like the easiest difficulty setting is still a pretty hard game.
Yes, as a kid, I played it on easy, and I still could not really get very far into it. But yeah, like I'm comparing this game to like other games that are notorious for their difficulty, like say Ninja Gaiden. And people love Ninja Gaiden. Why is that?
I still do. Yeah.
Because it starts out easy. I think most people can beat the first stage of Ninja Gaiden pretty easily. Second stage, maybe not so much, but it has a starting point. Actraiser 2 really does not. Like, if you play the first recommended level, like, the mini-boss does a lot of damage to you. But if you can get past him, you then have to make this pretty pixel-perfect jump across a swamp to the other side of a hollow tree. If you miss that jump, you are gonna die. That swamp will kill you too quickly for you to get back to safety. And so the fact that the game's like demanding that you have the controls mastered right at the beginning, it's a pretty tall ask of the player, I think. Now, nowadays, I do actually appreciate the challenge, but it took some time to get to the point where I did.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. I agree with all of that. I also think this game is like very difficult. So I'm the one who wanted to talk about this game in the podcast because I'm like I don't think I ever gave this game a fair shake, to be honest, because like, you know, to be like Sean, when this game came out, I found out very quickly that it didn't have a simulation mode and was immediately turned off by it because I'm like, well, I love that part. You know, like, why would I want to play this one? So, and you know, apparently I wasn't alone. Even though the game reviewed very well when it came out, a lot of people were like, "What is this? Why isn't there a simulation part of this?" So I think that probably Enix just asked the wrong people for feedback on this game, maybe, perhaps, but because I don't know, it's weird, but in any event, yeah, popular reaction to this game was not what they expected, and therefore the game did not do anywhere near as well as Actraiser did. Also by this point, Soul Blazer had also been released as well too, and even though Soul Blazer is not a great game, I still think it's I still like it, and this game is also missing that RPG aspect that Soul Blazer had in it too. So I think people were just kind of disappointed as this being like Quintet's like third game overall. So the main reason I want to play this podcast was because I'm like, I don't think I've ever given this game a fair shake. So let me go back and give it a fair shake. And now I could say, overall, I like this game. I think honestly I was too hard this game 30 years ago when it came out because I immediately dismissed it because we were lacking the simulation part and part of it came because too difficult. But I think if you actually give this game some time and effort, it's a pretty good platformer. It's not a great game. I don't think it's not the best platformer in the system. But I think platforming this game is better than the platforming like an Actraiser 1 for sure. And like Joe said, the graphics are even better in this game than they are in the first game. I agree with you, Joe. The music in this game, even though it is the same guy, I don't think I don't think the music in this game is quite as good as a soundtrack like an Actraiser. It is still a good soundtrack, but it's not the same like really uplifting and great soundtrack the first game has. So
it's darker and more somber.
Yes, which fits the overall theme of the game very well too.
Yeah.
Because this game is a much more somber, darker game to it. I mean, like the plot of this game is definitely much more serious. Most of the plot's either told to you in the manual or the opening story, or the very last stage of the game. That last stage of the game, by the way, is very powerful with its imagery because it's like because angels, your angel assistants talk to you, and you see them like die in front of you, and you also see like dead angels and chirps laid around the ground in the ground as you advance. It's very powerful imagery right there for sure. So I thought this game did that a whole like more dark and serious tone very well. The platforming. I agree about the controls being difficult. They take some getting used to. I agree about the hitboxes kind of being off. I do like the variety of options you have available to you. Like you actually could raise your shield above you to protect you from projectiles coming down, which is a nice touch. And the double jump and also the whole like float down a 45-degree angle sword attack move is also like very nice. So the main bosses in this game also, by the way, are also all named after and themed after one of the 7 deadly sins, which is also like a very nice touch. So like the first game, the overall stage design and monster creation of this game is very good, I thought. So I think that. I kind of think this game was kind of unfairly attacked for when it came out. It came out for the wrong reasons, because I think that if this game come out by itself, and I'm curious to hear what you guys think about this. If this game come out in a vacuum with a different name, was it connected at all to Actraiser 1? I think this game would have gotten like better received when it came out than it actually did.
I will agree with that to an extent. Yeah, if it had no ties to the Actraiser name, people might have responded better to it. I do also think, though, that it needed to have a difficulty curve for people to warm up to it more, rather than like, here's all these hard stages, good luck.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and you can't even access the last stage, Death Helm, unless playing the game on hard, which is really a kick. So,
well, you can't access it on easy anyway. You can access it on normal.
Oh, can you? Okay.
Yeah. When I played it recently, I played it on normal because I really wasn't in the mood to play it on hard.
Yeah. Okay. No. I played it on hard. I played it on hard. I played it on hard for this playthrough because I wanted to get the full experience of the game.
Oh, so, okay. Yeah, I guess I might have to do that sometime.
Well, I made heavy use of save states because like the first game, this game's not available. It's not available on any current platform and or system. So, I really don't recommend playing it on hard. I think normal's fine. Just like the game's hard enough as it is. But so I think overall that maybe I probably shouldn't have been so hard on this game 30 years ago, because I think this game is still a fine game. It's not, having played and loved the first game so much, it was a real letdown and a real disappointment to me over the, like those reasons I mentioned previously. So that's why I just said, I think Joe, you come in this game without that baggage, you were probably best positioned to get the best experience out of this game, and it sounds like you did. So, because forgive me if I'm mistaken, but it sounds like you enjoy the platform in this game better than the first game.
Yeah, I definitely felt like you had a little bit more ability in this game. Mobility. There we go. In this game than you did in the first one, and obviously not having the sim stuff, whatever. But yeah, I mean, I still think there should have been some sort of sim section in here, even if it was something where like they revamp it to where it's like, oh well, now you just control the angel shooting the demons, and you don't have to actually clear land and whatever else. Like your civilization just takes care of itself. Then I think that there would have been people who would have complained, that it was, very easy or whatever, in the sim mode, but at least it would have been there, and, they could at least be like, hey, you know what? Like, we didn't remove it, but we did have to revamp it because North Americans don't know how to play Sims. I don't know.
Well, Sean mentioned Actraiser 2 was made at the request of Enix America, designed the specification. So it's like, that's why I said it's like, it's weird because it's like, Enix is saying make this game action only, but then the game didn't sell very well because it was action only. So it's like it's weird. It's like I don't know what wires got crossed there, but obviously some wires got crossed. So.
They were talking to the wrong
Sean,
kids. That's what was going on.
I guess apparently, but but Sean, so what do you think overall as this game as the first game? What are your final thoughts on it?
I don't think it's as good as the first game.
I agree with that.
I would not put it on a list of must-play Super Nintendo games, but if you are looking for a challenge and you're ready and you're willing to get destroyed a little bit before you get comfortable with the game, then it actually is pretty fun once you get into it. And like Joe said, the graphics are a big improvement over the first one. Soundtrack maybe not as good as the first one. And I did want to mention, because Greg, you talked about in the first game how Nintendo of America had to censor some things, and they did that in this game to an extent as well with the Seven Deadly Sins, because they didn't want it to be too obvious of a biblical reference there, so they changed the names of some of the bosses or moved them around so that the Seven Deadly Sins thing wasn't as obvious. I think Gluttony was the only one that actually remained the same.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
Like they had Envy, but it was the Act 1 boss instead of the Act 2 boss, just to kind of disguise it a little bit. And then Greed was like moved over to a completely different part of the game. Yeah, so that was something they were doing. Controls wise, like, you definitely have more options in this game in combat. Like, there's the down thrust and the gliding, and I do like how the magic is more balanced. It's not as broken as it was in the original Actraiser.
True.
And you have access to all of your spells, like, from the beginning, and it's just based on what action you're doing at the time when you let go of the attack button after you hold it down to charge it up. So you can do like the forward fire stream, or the lightning in midair, or the diving like Phoenix attack. That one's really good.
Yes.
Oh yeah, and I also wanted to mention that there's a password in the game that allows you to fight Tanzra from Actraiser 1.
Yes. Yep.
That was pretty neat, and he's a lot faster in Actraiser 2 than he was in the first game, so that he'll beat you pretty badly at least a few times before you get the hang of it, even if you're used to fighting him in the first game.
Right. Yep. Yeah, definitely. So, this game is often ranked included in people's like top 100 games like the system. It just is like ranked much lower that list they compared to like Actraiser 1 is. So, it's like a lot of people do consider this to be a very good game by today's standards. I think probably the game's better thought of now than it was like 30 years ago, actually, because people like me have come to realize that despite this game being very different, there is still a very fun, challenging gameplay here. So it is interesting to see like how time can color somebody's perspective on things, for sure.
Yeah.
So, both good or bad. So couple other like interesting tidbits to mention about this game. It was actually published in Europe by Ubisoft because Enix had no European branch at that time. And as a matter of fact, Enix didn't last much longer in North America either. They shut down their North American branch of operations in 1994 circa because their games hadn't done very well in North America for one reason or another. And Enix did not return to publishing their own games in North America until after the company had merged with Square to form Square Enix like about 10 years later. So. And also, there was a remake of this game planned way before the actual remake. The actual remake did actually come out. In 1996, Sega announced that they would be publishing a quintet-developed remake of an Actraiser game, which would combine elements of both 1 and 2, like that remake.
Yeah,
So,
I think I read about that.
Yeah, the game was planned for the Sega Saturn. So, but halfway through development, Quintet decided that the Actraiser series the Actraiser series. Well, they said their research indicated the Actraiser series was out modded, and the game wouldn't do very well. I think Quintet saw the writing on the wall as far as the Saturn went, and was like, we need to find somebody who's out of this contract.
Yeah,
That could be.
I mean, imagine how different this podcast would be if it had come out. Because then, being the Sega kid, and I, put money into the Saturn instead of going for the PlayStation or upgrading to the Nintendo 64, like that would have been a totally different aspect. I would have come.
Well,
I would have come through literally a hybrid of a hybrid game.
Yes. So that Actraiser remake that Quintet was making did eventually come out as Solar Crisis, by the way. So, that game did eventually come out, just a very different form. And then to add more evidence, to the fact I was saying before how Actraiser was still relevant, Quintet did start coding a third game in the series, like the N64. They didn't get very far. They didn't get very far, like in the development of that game, but they canceled it also. So there were two failed attempts to try to bring a new Actraiser game to more modern at the time platforms, which was interesting. Also, the Japanese have such great names like their games, I think, over there, because Actraiser 2 in Japan was released as Actraiser 2 Crusade to Silence, which is a great name. So I always love how evocative and powerful the Japanese names of games are over there. So, compared to what we usually get over here in the West. But Actraiser has remained a fan favorite over the years, obviously. And despite all those past attempts, apparently Square Enix decided that finally there wasn't enough interest in the game still, and the game still for them to do a remake. And they went ahead and did a full remake of the game in practically every way, shape, or sense of the form, by releasing Actraiser Renaissance 2001 for multiple consoles, Android, Apple, Switch, PS4, and Windows. Not Xbox, curiously enough. There are a lot of games that there are a lot of games that, even though they're released on multiple consoles, they get skipped from the Xbox for some reason. So I always found that to be very interesting, but it is what it is. So, but anyway, yeah. So that game was developed in-house by Square Enix themselves. Anyway, since you played this recently, Sean, why don't you talk about the game for us? I can open it up.
All right, yeah. So I remember when this was announced, and I don't think anybody was expecting it, because
nobody was. I had no knowledge of this game coming out. Period. As a matter of fact, I knew nothing about this game was actually released, and I saw a trailer for it. And
yeah, same.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Actraiser, those of us who played it back in the day remembered it fondly, but there had been nothing for many years,
a long time.
Since 1993 when Actraiser 2 came out. So I think most of us were just expecting we'd never hear anything from it again, and it would just always be a memory to us. And if we hadn't the means to play the originals, then there was that, but we'd never get something like this. So this game it's a pretty detailed remake of the original. Same basic story in that you're the master and you're trying to defeat Tanzra's demons and repopulate the world. And I do actually appreciate the fact that they, at least in the English version, they still use the names Master and Tanzra instead of renaming them to God and Satan, just because that's what I grew up with. So I like seeing that consistency rather than going back to the original Japanese. They expanded both the action stage combat and they really expanded the simulation stages. As far as the action stages go, and you can now do combos, damage numbers appear. There's even elemental weaknesses, which is something I didn't even realize until like pretty far into the game. Like, and if you cast like the fire spell, then your weapon will actually be enchanted with fire for a limited amount of time, so you can continue to do fire damage to enemies that are weak to it. So that's kind of neat. They added a backstep, which, considering how revamped the bosses are in Renaissance, you're gonna need to get the hang of that backstep, because if you don't use it, they're gonna hurt you bad. Enemies now drop crystals, which if you collect enough of them, they'll improve your regular attack, your magic attack, and then if you get enough, it also gives you a one-time auto-resurrect for each stage per life. So you can, every time you have to die and replay a boss or whatever, you'll get that resurrect back, which is very helpful in some cases.
Oh, yeah.
The level layout is very similar to the original game. There are MP scrolls hidden throughout the levels now, rather than getting them in the simulation stages. So if you want to be able to cast more spells, you better find those. And like magic in this game is pretty dang helpful because it's not as busted as it was in the original game, but it's still like you use it right on the bosses and you'll have a big advantage. Heck, you even get a healing spell, which the original game did not have, so that was super helpful. Yeah. And then, as far as the simulation is concerned, you're still guiding your people to each monster lair, but now, instead of the people automatically sealing up the lair for you, you now have to enter a small action stage where you have to destroy these monster spawners, and then a big spawner appears, and once you defeat that one, the stage is clear. It's very quick, but I thought it was like a nice little addition to break up the simulation stages, because they are much longer in this game than they were in the original. Levels are now determined by faith, which you gain by completing quests that the people give you. So it's no longer directly tied to your population, but some quests do require you to reach certain population levels. So in a sense, it's still like increase your population to level up, but only to a certain extent. And then one of the big things that they added to the simulation stages are the heroes that appear in each area. They all have like their own plot line and character development, so I thought that was really cool. And just in general, the story is a lot more. It's expanded a lot from the original game. Yes. And then there's also the siege battles where it
tower defense. Yep.
Yeah, it becomes a tower defense game. Yep. Monsters come from various sides of the map and try to go toward your temple in the middle, and you can use your heroes and also build forts around to try to stop them as much as you can. That part of it was not my favorite. Like, I didn't sign on for a tower defense when I started playing the game, but I was still like kind of able to figure it out eventually. Like, even if a particular siege battle was giving me trouble, it's like if you move your forts to the right places, because the enemies are always going to spawn in the same spots, and they're always going to be the same types of enemies. So you'd be like, okay, there are these flying magic resistant enemies coming from this spot, so I'm going to put a blockhouse here which shoots arrows at them, and that'll take them down real quick. So there's some trial and error there. The angel moves and attacks better than in the original game. Like, it's not you can move diagonally for one, and your arrows are now have some homing capability to them, and you can also charge them up to shoot 3 at a time. So you got more options there. Let's see, what am I forgetting?
I think it pretty much like covered most of the gameplay, but the gameplay aspects there. Graphics and music were also vastly expanded, of course.
Still by Yuzo Koshiro, so he's got his experience with the soundtrack already, and so he knows how to make it sound modern.
Yeah, it's awesome they were able to hire him to during the project because half the music in the game is like brand new music.
Yeah.
So
they add a lot of songs to it.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. So I know from reading interviews with him that some of the music in the music in this game was music that Koshiro wanted to have in the original game, but there wasn't room for it in the cards time period. So he's used his old notes to to make up the new music to go with the games. That's pretty cool. So and the graphics also they still look 16-bit while still being updated to more modern standards. That makes sense. They're very. Yes, sir.
I did also want to comment on the character illustrations in this game. I think those were the highlight for me in terms of visuals, because you didn't have anything like that in 1991 when the first game came out.
The game's also a lot longer too. Not only because you have not only because you have the tower defense stuff adding on length, but there's also the stages themselves are also just longer. You also get a new additional new land to explore after the original six stages are finished, which is a nice touch. So. The game definitely goes in directions that the previous game did not do so, which is also very nice. So, but yeah, thank you. That's a very great summary of the game overall. So
and regarding the length, the original Actraiser can be beaten in a few hours, like we mentioned before. Right. This game took me 30 hours to fully complete. So you
also played on hard for some reason.
That's true.
Because you were letting the punch.
Even though I didn't play Actraiser 2 on hard, I did play this game on hard because I was pretty confident in my abilities, but there were some parts that gave me some trouble for sure.
Right, yeah, I don't blame you. I played it at normal because I'm I don't want to deal with this, but this is Renaissance is basically what the game would have been if the developers had made the game now versus 30 years ago, because of course there's many games that developers wish they could do more to, but they couldn't because of time constraints or limitations on technology or publisher demands or whatever. They have any program we talk to has a grandiose idea for a game, but they have to boil down and release a very cropped version of it for one reason or another. Actraiser Renaissance really is what the game would have been had it come out in 2021 as opposed to 1991, as far as its size and scope. For sure, and it's always fun to see that. What if the developers could do now that they could not do back then? What they would have done. So Renaissance, I think, is a great way of looking at that to see how the finished product would turned out. So, Joe, I know this game is not. I know this game is not going to be for. It's not going to be for you because the simulation aspect of this game is already covered is way bigger than was the first game. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts about the game.
So, are you done with your thoughts?
Okay. Yes. Yep.
Man. All right. So, it's going to sound like I'm totally attacking this game, but remember, I'm not nostalgic for it. I'm coming at this fresh eyes and not really knowing much. Obviously I played the first 2 games before I tackled Renaissance, but wow. Pre-rendered graphics is probably not the decision I would have gone with. I feel like this remaster looks dated before it even got out of the gate. Now keep in mind I am playing the Switch version, no updates, so things might have changed. I just want to let everyone know that I was playing a day one copy of it that had no updates, no nothing.
I don't think any patches for this game came out. Sean, do you remember seeing anything like about this game? Because I don't.
I don't know.
Yeah, so I think you're fine, Joe. I don't think that Square Enix did release any updates to this game.
I don't know. This feels like something that was created for like the PlayStation or Dreamcast era. And that's not a knock on the game. Like, I like it. It's got some charm to it. But, I don't know. The pre-rendered graphics kind of, for me, just kind of killed it for me. I agree, like, the sprites look pretty good. And I like the details that you see on the characters and stuff. But, like, I don't know. The backgrounds, like, some of the parallax scrolling going on, just didn't really work for me. Like, it just felt clunky. It definitely felt like it was stuttering a bit when I was playing. So those are all things I want to make sure that I mentioned.
That's definitely Switch, because I did this Switch for sure, because I played the game on Steam and played it like no problems with that at all.
Yeah, I also played it on Steam, and I don't think I had any issues with that.
The Switch, we all know, chugs on some games.
So that's why I wanted to, precursor that I was playing this on the Switch and let everyone know, like, my opinion is based on the Switch version.
Sure.
So it's the remake of the first one. So same things kind of apply here. There's patterns that you need to learn. Those bosses are killer. So the first level was pretty easy. Like, getting through that level was great. I was like, wow, okay, this is kind of breezy. I kind of like it. That first boss that killed me 20 times in the first Actraiser game killed me about 40 in this game. By the time I learned his pattern and everything else, I was doing the downward thrust as he was like galloping by. I was basically running in, like, slashing the hell out of him, and then when I'd see like the lightning start to build, I would back up and let him do his thing, and then go back to jumping and slashing. But yeah, I don't know. I felt like this was really unbalanced, because I beat the next two bosses no issue at all. So, like, I don't know, like, what happened, but, like, that first boss was a major pain. But, yeah, the next two were fine. Had no issues. Sim mode was the biggest change that I noticed. There is a lot of text. Oh, my God. So, little inside baseball. I am currently going through the Final Fantasy series. Started with Final Fantasy 1. I'm currently on Final Fantasy 4. I'm pretty burnt out on RPGs and reading, so this did not come at a good time. On top of that, for the Radical Retro Roundup, George has me playing Final Fantasy Tactics for the Game Boy Advance. So, again, yes. So, not only was I not playing something I was familiar with and do very well with here, but I'm also doing that for the other podcasts as well. So, needless to say, all the added text, yes, it expands the story. That is great for you and Sean and Greg. That was not great for me. I skipped a lot of it. And you know what? Like, I get it. Like, I like the streamline to where, like, you can charge up your arrows as the angel. That was nice. You're right, Sean. Like, it feels like they're kind of like homing arrows. Like, you kind of just got to get in the general area. So that aspect of it was nice. I do like that now you have to go into the demon layers and you have to resolve the problem yourself, not relying on your population. Another cool aspect. Why did they add a tower defense game?
You and I are in agreement there.
All right, so, and I'm pretty sure most people are going to feel the same way, but when I think of tower defense games, I think of my little mobile games that occupy my time when I'm absolutely bored at work and like I just need something to kind of kill some brain cells and some time. I do not like tower defense games. So the fact that I had to play the tower defense mode 5 times in just the first level,
it's excessive.
Yeah. and like oh my god, I really felt like every few minutes, like you were getting notifications saying, "Oh, your people want to talk to you," or they're requesting this, and I was just like, why does that have to be ramped up? Like I get and I know why, because they thought that expanding the sim was going to be able to bring in those old fans, and they were trying to do fan service. I know what they were trying to do. It just didn't come across very well. But yeah, the tower defense thing killed me. I do like that you direct the protector and that every town has a protector. So that's kind of nice. And, like Sean said, like you can figure out the patterns, and if you end up dying or, not beating that particular tower defense, you make a mental note. Like, oh, okay, flying things come from over here. Set up the archer, and do your thing. And that's the other thing too. I feel like the tower defense part of it just crawled. Like there wasn't a way to really speed it up. I felt like the monsters moved way too slow. So it was, I get it. Like they're trying to pad it out. They're trying to add to that simulation aspect, and give people a reason to be buying the remake at $30. I completely understand all the reasons why they did it. It just did not come across very well.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, you're not the only one to say that. I like the tower defense part, but I also agree with you that it's probably the biggest part of the game.
And what also was disappointing, and again, this is probably a Switch issue, but even in sim mode, like there was some stuttering and oh man, it was. If anybody's thinking about getting this on the Switch, don't. That's the one thing I can take away from this.
Yeah.
Ultimately,
I buy as little on the Switch as possible for that reason,
in all honesty, I think the music in this game is fantastic. And obviously, modern technology, CD quality that you can, have attached to the game now. I expected it to be even bigger and more fantastic. And it was nice to hear some of the familiar tunes and whatnot revamped and reworked. But ultimately, for me, this remake fell flat, and I'd rather play the original.
Yeah, again, you're not alone saying that. I mean, as great as as great as Renaissance is, I think it's like a great game. And I think Renaissance does stand fine on its own. Like Sean said, the main appeal of the game is going to be toward fans who grew up with the original games, and I think, and some fans have definitely said, I think Renaissance is too complex to me. I'd rather stick with the original game. That's fair. That's fine. I understand that. I think Renaissance gives me everything I was looking for in a remake. I think overall the remake's excellent. I definitely understand and would not fault anybody who says they prefer the original game. So I knew you'd be hard on this show, both because you didn't have nostalgia and also because the simulation aspects of this game were way cranked up at factor 10. So I'm not surprised to hear that, but I am surprised to hear about the Switch issues because because the game's not really that demanding. I didn't think, but I guess that's what it is.
Like I said, that's why I said it was the game itself, no updates. So I don't know, if they had released updates for the Switch.
I don't think so.
I mean?
Yeah, I don't. So. Yeah, so most of the music remixes of this game I love. I think that Yuzo did a great job with the remixes. I think I prefer you know, I know I mentioned this to Sean previously. I think I prefer the original Bloodpool music compared to the remix here. But I think beyond that, most remixes here sounded better, and you know, I enjoy them even more than the original game did. So. And like, the price point, $30, was a bit steep. I know folks complained about that when the game came out to get that price point, but I'm also like, well, it's a full remake. It's like, you know, you're not getting like a remaster of the game here. It's like this literally is a new product from the ground up practically. So I think $30 was like a fair price point to charge for it. And the game does go on sale occasionally here and there. When I bought the game for Sean, for example, it was on sale. So if you're patient, you definitely can snag the game for a cheaper price.
Yeah, like I mentioned when we first started talking about this game, it took me 30 hours to complete it. So
wow. Okay. All right. Yeah.
I think $30 is fair for that. I've played much shorter games that cost more.
Yep. Yeah, I hear you on that. So, but so overall. Overall, I think Renaissance was a very pleasant surprise when it came out, and I think overall the game does very well. It's like, you know, I think that. I think Joe's reaction to the game is totally fair, with like the reason that I said. But I think that anybody who does enjoy the original game definitely check out Renaissance. If you're, even if you haven't, I think if you're a fan of either platformers or simulations, there's enough being offered in Renaissance to make the game fun for you regardless. So I think Renaissance did what it was trying to do in the first place pretty well overall, I thought. So I was very happy to buy it and play it for sure. So it doesn't replace the original game. I think the original game still has its own charm and style to it that the new game can't reproduce. But I think for what it is, Renaissance is a very nice update to Actraiser like the 21st century for sure. So, but anyway, Those are the Actraiser franchise, the Actraiser games. It's like, it's possible Square Enix might see how well Renaissance did and possibly make a new game in the franchise. I wouldn't say it's possible. I haven't heard anything about it, but I think that the fact this game suddenly got made when there hadn't been anything made in the franchise for like 20 plus years is definitely something, because I said before in this podcast many times, Joe, as you may remember, you never give hope as far as the franchise goes, because you made the game come out of the blue like 10, 20, 30 years later for something that you always assume is like dead and buried. So I'm not going to say the franchise is dead at this point. Like I said, the game sold very well. They're very, it's very possible. Maybe they might do a remake of Actraiser 2. That'd be interesting to see. So, I play that for sure. But, I'd be very curious to see if anything else does come out in this franchise. Like the future.
I mean, I would actually like to see them actually create what their original idea for Actraiser 2 was. Instead of doing a remake,
Sega Saturn version?
You know what I mean? Like them actually saying,
well,
okay, well, here's this is what we were planning on doing to expand the simulation, stuff like that. Unless it's tower defense games again, then forget that.
Right. So, but yeah, definitely. So, okay, end of the podcast. This is where you should talk about like cheat codes, tricks, that kind of stuff. Finding out the eBay pricing if you're curious to. Find out how much this game usually goes for these days. Actraiser, not really too much of that game for secrets. We already mentioned how to access professional mode. You have to beat the game first. There are some hidden lives you can find. Simulation stages of the game if you know what to do. Usually it involves just using X power at Y spot in the stage to find those. Actraiser 2, as Sean mentioned, there are various passwords available. One of the passwords does allow you to go right to the improved version, the improved version like a Tensora. There's also a password that allows you to play the demo level, and you can also see a cutscene with the credits as well by doing it by doing like another password as well too. So. And there are also Sean, I'm curious if you found these. I actually didn't know about this until after I finished Renaissance. There are just like in Actraiser, there are two hero scrolls that are found in secret locations in Renaissance. You can find the Alonzo scroll by using a certain magic, like the pyramid, and like the Danielle scroll by using a certain magic, like a certain spot in Blood Pool. So it is kind of cool that they carried some same Easter eggs.
I mean, I'd completed every quest in the game, so I guess maybe I got those if they are considered quests.
They're not. These are like pure Easter eggs. Yes, you got to. The game doesn't tell you at all. It always are. You just have to find them yourself.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I found those then.
I didn't. But I didn't.
I don't even think I need to say I didn't.
You find both scrolls by using a certain magic, a certain spot, basically. So the game doesn't tell you. The game doesn't give you any. The game doesn't give you like any hints about that.
Okay.
So, but it is cool to have that same. But it's cool to have those Easter eggs carried over. So that's a nice touch. So, Actraiser sold very well when it came out, obviously. So. So, looking for a copy on eBay, no problem. There's plenty of copies to find. At the time of doing research on this, there were 103 copies of the game currently being listed, 154 copies of the game the game that recently sold. These prices include shipping. Probably because the game is so popular and because it's not available for sale anymore. Cart prices have held up pretty well, I thought. This is actually a more pricier Super NES game because of its popularity, I thought. There's sold copies of the cart only sold anywhere from $25 to $6. And if you want a CIB copy of the game, CIB meaning complete in box, that is manual. And sometimes the map. There also was a very cool poster which came with the original game, which I remember hanging on my wall as a kid. It's like. There's a map on one side, and also a neat drawing montage of the bosses of the game, on the other side. So some CIB copies include the poster copies. Those more tend toward the higher prices. Anyway, CIB copies of the game sold anywhere from $110 to $210. And there are some sealed copies. There are some sealed copies of the game that the game sold also, anywhere from $277 all the way up to $1,065 like the more graded professional copies. Which already my thoughts about that. So, but anyway, yeah. So. $25 for this game is still pretty pricey for Super NES games. So I think the values hold up. The values have stayed high because this game is so popular for people these days. So curiously, Actraiser 2 is being sold for almost as much, even though the game's not as common to find. 62 copies of the game were listed on eBay for 49 copies recently sold. Again, the prices probably are higher for this game too, both because people consider it to be more of a popular game these days, and also because of the fact that simply the supply of this game is not as plentiful as the first game is. With Actraiser 2, copies of the game, the copies of the card only sold from $26 to $49, and CIB copies of the game sold from $112 to $300. So very similar pricing for Actraiser 2 like the first game. So. I think $25 like the cart for both games is worth it, I think personally, because I think both games used to hold up pretty well today, but but just be prepared. It is more expensive than the usual Super NES game for sure.
I was actually a little surprised that the complete in box price for the first Actraiser wasn't higher, because usually if it comes with a map or something special that most games don't have, the price goes up more for that, at least in terms of the ones I've seen in the past, Earthbound in box with its player's guide, that usually fetches a pretty penny.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think the main reason for that is because of the popularity of the game and how many copies were made of the game. I think it's the reason.
All
also,
right.
while it's a nice poster, it's not critical for gameplay like in any way. So, like to compare that like Player's Guide for Earthbound, which is absolutely critical to play the game with, because believe me, I've tried.
Yeah, I used it back in the day.
But thank God that game's thank God that game's commonly available these days, because those prices are still because those prices are still like sky high for sure. But anyway, yeah. So, and as we mentioned, Renaissance sells for $30 by default, but you can't find the game for sale, wait for like a sale or whatnot. Unless unless you want to buy a Switch copy, because Switch copies never seem to go on sale for whatever reason. So, but anyway, yeah. So this was a lot of fun revisiting this franchise. Like I said before, Actraiser is still one of my favorite games of all this is still a game. This is a game I still adore to this day because of its graphics, music, and gameplay, and whatever. If you haven't, there is an orchestrated version of the Actraiser music done by Polsky Orchestra, like in Japan. It's very popular in Japan for them to take like popular video game soundtracks and actually have an orchestra play them. So the orchestra version of the soundtrack sounds amazing as well too. So if you haven't already checked that out on YouTube, I definitely recommend it, because it's definitely a listening treat.
Nice.
But anyway, yeah. So thank you again, Sean, for joining us on this podcast. It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure having you here, and also a pleasure having you on my side for like pro Actraiser to help to offset Joe here. But I kid Joe, but it was also great hearing your perspective on the game. From first time person doing it, which is why I wanted to include the first game along with the sequel because you hadn't played the game. So. So thank you again, as always, for being willing to check out new games and for your perspective fresh. So yeah. But anyway, you can find our podcast on online. We also have a Facebook page. You can also give us questions, comments, suggestions, whatever. Anyway, Sean. So do you have any projects, things or anything that were anything to care to plug at this time?
I think the only thing I'll mention, since we've been talking about music a lot in this podcast, I have a quiz, a video game music quiz on the website Sporkle. It's if you search for the 100 song video game music gauntlet, you should find it. There's 100 songs, and they can be from like any era of gaming, and it's a pretty difficult quiz, I would say. Like if you get 30 out of 100 right, like that's a really good score if you ask me. But I bring it up because Actraiser is on the quiz, so there's your first hint if you decide to take it.
Of course, yeah. But yeah, that's cool. I didn't know about that, so thanks. I'll definitely have to check that out for sure. So, and Joe, where can they find you at?
You can find me on the internet. You can just Google me. You'll find me. I also have very public and not family-friendly Facebook. And then I have a not-so-family-friendly podcast, the Radical Retro Roundup. But yeah, you Google any of that stuff, you'll find it. It's available on everything that has podcasts. So
awesome. Okay. So we usually would mention here at this point what our next episode is going to be. I don't want to say that at this point because while we do have another episode lined up with another guest host, we still need to confirm with said guest host. So I don't want to jinx anything by saying anything and not have it actually happen next. So I'll just say, with any luck, hopefully we will have another episode, a special episode coming up for you guys next time with the guest host, and if not next time, then soon after that. So let's stay tuned.
I can guarantee it'll be another episode. So we can at least confirm that.
Yes, there will be 223. We just don't know exactly which game is going to be on there at this point yet. So, but speaking about games, let me ask you guys one last question to wrap things up here. Sean, I'm curious to curious to hear, because I think I know what you're going to say, but I want to hear it directly because I'm curious. Out of the three Actraiser games we talked about, the Actraiser games that we covered in this podcast, how would you rank them personally?
Actraiser 1's my favorite. I mean, that was a formative childhood game for me. So even if it wasn't great on its own, the nostalgia alone is that's what puts it at number 1 for me. I've recently played both Renaissance and Actraiser 2, and while I guess I gotta put Renaissance at number 2 because I think it's a better put together game in terms of like not alienating the players like Actraiser 2 did for the reasons we described earlier. And even though I didn't love everything about it, I do think it's a nice, fresh look at the original game. And it's definitely worth a try for anyone who was a fan of the original. So yeah, I put that at number 2, and then Actraiser 2 at number 3. Not because I hate it, even though maybe I would have said that back when I first played the game, but I do think if you're willing to plug away at it and lose over and over again and eventually get used to how it works, there's enjoyment to find there in the challenge.
Yep, I agree with you 100% as far as the comments and rankings go. So, Joe, how about you?
I'm with Sean on this one. It's the first game, and then the remake, and then finally Actraiser 2. Gameplay-wise, I mean, it all makes sense. Obviously, if we were doing graphically, I would totally put the second one first, just because I think that game's gorgeous.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
But, yeah, gameplay-wise, I completely agree with Sean.
Cool. Okay. All right. Awesome. Well, again, Sean, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy day, like whatnot, to join us here on this podcast. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
We'd love to have you back in the future at some point to talk about another Super NES game, your favorite of yours. Assuming we haven't already covered it.
Yeah, we'll see.
As long as it's not a sim game.
You probably won't get me to be here for any other sim games, just Actraiser.
There weren't that many other sim games like the system, because there's only like a handful, really. But I mean, you have SimEarth, SimCity, SimAnt.
I can't wait till we cover SimAnt.
Sorry, not SimAnt. SimEarth. Let's think about like SimCity 2000, SimEarth all came out in the system, and I think that's it as far as SimCity goes. There were a couple others. There were a couple other sim games in the system, but the system didn't have a lot of those. So I think you're up the hook, Joe. So. But anyway, and Joe, as always, appreciate you joining us.
Yeah,
joining us for this.
I signed up for this.
Yep. Anyway, again, thank you very much for listeners out there for listening to the podcast. As always, I appreciate it. We'll catch you again next time. Stay safe, be well, everybody, and see you again soon. Thanks all. Later.
Bye.
Bye.
Nintendo controls 80% of the video market. But no matter how you play the game, or which game you play, things definitely have come a long way since Pac-Man.
Now you're playing with power. Super power.